Thank you very much for that warm introduction. It is a pleasure to be here in Fresno and a pleasure to be speaking to Rotarians. I know many Rotarians up in Sacramento, and there was a reference to the wheelchair effort, and one of the things that the Sacramento Rotary did was to send wheelchairs to South America. I believe it was Venezuela. And in talking to the people who are running the program, it's just not a question of raising the money and the transportation, but when they got down there, they had to deal with rampant corruption and government officials wanting to take a slice of each shipment of wheelchairs that they could sell in the black market. So I really appreciate what you do, because it's just not all fuzzy good stuff. It's sometimes you have to really get down the trenches, particularly when you're dealing with international entities that may not be very friendly to Americans. So I really applaud what you do. Again, it's a pleasure to be here. We're coming up on the 39th anniversary of Proposition 13, and the mission of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association is first and foremost to protect Prop 13 against the constant assaults. I was an attorney with Pacific Legal Foundation, and they did do a lot of environmental laws. But right now, I'm in a way, I'm practicing environmental law because I'm trying to protect that endangered species known as the California taxpayer. And trust me, you guys are very much in danger. Our mission statement was that we are dedicated to the protection of Proposition 13 and the advancement of taxpayer rights, including the right to limited taxation, the right to vote on tax increases, and the right of economical, equitable, and efficient use of taxpayer dollars. Now, there may be different views in this room about what the proper size and scope of government should be. Some of us think that government should be a little bit smaller. Some people think government should do a little bit more. But whatever you believe about the size of government and the functions of government at the state, local, or federal level, I think we can all agree that the money should be used efficiently. And in California, it's not, the debate so much isn't on the size of government. It's a big government here, but it's that so much money is wasted. Someone told me that somebody's trying to build a train around here, you know? And I led the campaign against that. It was called Proposition 1A. And as of midnight on election night, when that was on the ballot, we were still ahead. It was going down to defeat, but the late votes that came in, this is Obama's first election, a lot of late votes came in, and Prop 1A, which was the high-speed rail bond, did pass. We are paying for that still. It is the most outrageous, ill-advised boondoggle on the face of the planet. Even the legislative analyst, not just taxpayer groups, has concluded that it is ill-advised. It's counter to the goals of global warming and climate change and the production of greenhouse gas emissions, but the ridership projections and the costs are way out of whack. If you're going from Northern California to Southern California, we have some infrastructure. It's called Highway 5, 99, and Southwest Airlines. And with Southwest Airlines, you can pick up the phone, get a ticket in about 20 seconds, and there's multiple flights a day from Sacramento and from Oakland down to Southern California. And when we were running the campaign against high-speed rail, I actually went to the lobbyist of Southwest Airlines and said, you know, this is going to compete with you guys. Will you help us out? And she laughed at me. She goes, high-speed rail is no threat to Southwest Airlines, because they knew, their own advisors had told them that it was a totally worthless project. Proposition 13 was really the beginning of the modern tax revolt movement. It wasn't, certainly not the first tax revolt in America. In 1773, a bunch of Bostonians, perhaps after having a few drinks, put war paint on and boarded an English ship and dumped tea into the Boston Harbor. And that was really, they were motivated, of course, by no taxation without representation, but they got a little wild that night, and that was really the beginning of the old tax revolt movement. There was another tax revolt that people haven't heard of too much, called the Whiskey Rebellion. That was in 1794, and President Thomas Jefferson had to send federal troops into West Virginia to quell that. It was called the Whiskey Rebellion because they wanted to tax whiskey. Now, taxpayer advocates, being as smart as they are, weren't going to dump out the whiskey like they did the tea. They drank it instead. So our goal is to protect Proposition 13. You know, more and more, as it's been almost 40 years, there is a fundamental misunderstanding of Proposition 13. A lot of people who owned homes back in the mid-70s, you know what was going on. People were deathly afraid of being taxed out of their homes. Tens of thousands of people, particularly in Los Angeles and the Bay Area, were being taxed out of their homes. It wasn't so much anger that passed Proposition 13 as it was fear, the fear of losing one's home. And I think we do polling on Proposition 13, and the good news is that if Proposition 13 were on the ballot today, it would pass by about the same 2/3 margin that it did back in 1978. And that's really good news, especially considering how leftward this state has moved. Somehow people intuitively do know that Prop 13 is that thing that keeps property taxes low. But unfortunately, even people who are on our side don't know the mechanics, and the mechanics are very simple. Proposition 13 took an average property tax rate of 2.6% applied to your property every year and reduced it to 1%. And just as important, if not more importantly, it limited the annual increases in taxable value to 2% a year. What was killing people in the mid-70s is not the tax rate, but the fact that their values were going up so fast. And the property taxes were based on value. So Howard Jarvis came in and said, we're going to allow the property to appreciate for tax purposes, but only 2% a year. And it's been a remarkable success in allowing people to stay in their homes. And it's not just a conservative thing. This aspect of Proposition 13 of limiting the taxable inflation of your property is being adopted by states as liberal as New York. Governor Cuomo has looked at that. And other states have taken this aspect of Proposition 13 and claimed it as their own. Howard Jarvis wanted to keep people, to allow them to stay in their homes, and on that count he was remarkably successful. He also wanted to limit the size and growth of government. And on that score, I have to say that Proposition 13 was a failure. Government is the #1 growth industry in California. It is becoming increasingly intrusive, increasingly burdensome, and increasingly taking more money out of your pockets. And that's where our fight continues. So we will continue to defend Proposition 13, but these efforts to try to restrain the size and growth of government have been less than successful. We have successfully defended Proposition 13 since 1978 with one exception. Back in the year 2000, there was an effort to lower the passage rate for local school bonds from 2/3 to 55%. That did pass. We actually defeated it the first time, and then they put it right back on the ballot, and it did pass. We all like schools. Education is very important to every person in this room. But can you say that education is better today than it was back in the year 2000? I don't think so. The problems with education are very dramatic, and we could be up here all day talking about the problems in California education. But the one thing you will hear from Proposition 13's detractors is that Prop 13 decimated education in the state of California. They said in the mid-70s, education in California was great. We had great after-school programs, great teachers, great administration, and then Prop 13 came along, and California's education system now ranks 48th, 49th, 50, whatever number you want. What we like to point out, however, is that today, with as abysmal of education system as we have, not everywhere, but in many places, that we are now spending on a per-student, inflation-adjusted basis more than 30% more than we were in the mid-70s when everybody agreed that education was great. So if we're spending 30% more in inflation-adjusted dollars today than we were in the mid-70s, what explains what's going on in California education? And again, it has to do a lot with Sacramento seizing control of our education system. It also has to do a lot with collective bargaining. Collective bargaining of public employees in the state of California has been one of the biggest problems that we have. You guys were, as taxpayers, you were endangered last year. You're even more endangered now because the California legislature, what can I say? They have secured the 2/3 vote necessary to jam every single tax increase they want down our throats. They just imposed a $5.2 billion a year gas tax. The Republican plan to fix transportation in California was very brilliant. They said, let's spend transportation dollars on transportation, don't divert it. If you spend the money that's generated from the gas tax and excise taxes and vehicle registration fees to transportation, we have more than enough money. But unfortunately, that's not what happened. The Republican plan for reforms, significant reforms of Caltrans. By the way, even the legislative analysts said that Caltrans was overstaffed by 3,500 employees, costing California's $500 million a year. So that was money that was not going into roads and infrastructure and the things that we need for a better transportation system in the state of California. Again, a misapplication of taxpayer dollars. We want good roads, we want good infrastructure, but the way California does it is remarkably poor. I've been asked a couple times to address what's called split roll. Split roll is not a pastry. Get that out of your mind. Split roll is the notion of dividing the assessor's tax rolls between commercial and residential. We constantly hear from the progressives that they want to split the roll and tax commercial property more to remove Proposition 13's protections from commercial property. Look, businesses already have a number of justifications for moving out of the state of California. We should not give them one more. Will we see a split roll proposal in 2018 on the ballot? I doubt it. They can read the same polling that we've seen, and the polling on their side is not very good. I think we can defeat a split roll proposal if it's on the ballot. California's policies, progressive policies that have been implemented through legislation and constitutional amendments, have led to some pretty abysmal metrics compared to other states. We now have the highest income tax rate in America by far, 13.3%. We are competing against other states like Florida, Texas, Nevada, Washington State, whose top marginal income tax rate is 0, no income tax. And so if you're a wealthy individual in the state of California and you start visiting Austin or Miami, and it's starting to look good for a lot of reasons. And by the way, that's why professional athletes like Mickelson and the Williams sisters, the tennis players, if you're a well-paid athlete, you do not declare residency in the state of California because they will really hit you. We have the highest state sales tax rate in America. We have the highest corporate tax in the West. We're competing against all other states west of the Mississippi. We have the highest corporate tax rate. My notes here say we have the 4th highest gas tax. That's no longer true, of course, with the passage of the new one. We are now number 1. How about property taxes? Property taxes, Prop 13. We have low property taxes, right? No. We rank 17th out of 50 states in per capita property tax collection, so we are not a low property tax state. We still have higher than average unemployment. We have the worst legal environment. I think the precise term is judicial hellhole. We have our welfare load is huge. We have 12% of the nation's population, but we carry 33% of the welfare rolls. And numbers just came out 3 weeks ago that in terms of the effective poverty rate, California is the poorest state in the union. We have a higher 20% poverty rate, higher than Mississippi. That is, and yet we live in such an economically diverse and a state that has so much potential and has so much going for it. We still have 20% poverty rate. That is inexcusable. What really bothers me the most is that the progressives who claim to look out for the little guy, they adopt policies that really drive this whole notion of income inequality. How many times have you heard, well, America has so much income inequality? we're divided between the rich and the poor. Well, that's true, and that's certainly true in California. But here's something to think about. If you're like a diesel mechanic in the Bay Area, you can't afford rent, but you can afford to buy a 2,200 square foot home in Houston or Austin, someplace in Texas, where housing is very, very cheap. So California is losing all kinds of demographics. We're losing high wealth individuals because of the 13.3% rate. They are finding ways to disassociate with California. They might keep a home here, but as long as they spend 50% of the days out of the state and establish their residency someplace else, kind of like Rush Limbaugh does with Florida. You notice that he spends 4 nights in Manhattan and 3 nights in his place in Florida. He does that to make sure he doesn't pay New York taxes. We're seeing that kind of taxpayer strategy here in California. We're losing well-educated college students. UC system is still pretty darn good, still one of the best in the nation, but when our college students graduate with degrees and they're looking at the job market, unless they're in the high-tech industry, they're not going to be able to afford anything in the Bay Area. So your average Bachelor of Arts student gets their degree, has a very hard time finding a job here in California. Skilled labor, like the diesel mechanic I talked about, and of course businesses. I will not sit here and depress you too much, maybe a little bit, about the number of businesses that have moved out. Nestle's Corporation moved from Glendale, California to Virginia. Intel moved all their major manufacturing out of the state of California. Comcast, Campbell Soup, Tesla moved their battery factory out. Apple, Boeing shut down their C-17 plant over and over and over again. So we have our work cut out for us. If you believe in a strong economy, you're Rotarians, so you tend to be perhaps more optimistic than the average person, and I think that's a very good thing. But we need to understand, I'm glad there was some discussion about helping local economies. Let's help local economies here in California, particularly in the Central Valley, where we have very, very high degrees of poverty, making sure that we give disadvantaged youth some opportunities to advance. And I think we can, if we focus on economic improvement, a responsible government, and a reasonable level of taxation, I think we'll be okay. Thank you very much. I'll take questions. Yeah. Be happy to take questions on tax or politics. I get sometimes I get a lot of political questions about what's really going on in Sacramento.
John, thank you for coming down here to Fresno to talk to us. What about SB 2? The Assembly and the Senate just passed a bill called SB 2, which will require me, the recorder, to charge another $75 on every document. On every document that comes into my office. I'm worried that many people that do not really have to file with the recorder, they're not going to come.
He hasn't signed it yet. My guess is he probably will. It was part of the housing bill. This is a bill to increase the recording fees for every document filed with the recorder's office, raising it substantially. I think the number is, it could be as high as $275 per real estate transaction. I think your recorder might be here and Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, all right. Is it 275, up to 275? 220, up to 225. You know, and here's the really embarrassing thing about that bill, Senate Bill 2, is that the money's supposed to go for housing programs. So only in California and Monty Python movies does raising a tax on real estate transactions help housing. That makes, it's like, you know, it's like if you're diagnosed with anemia being prescribed leeches or something. I mean, it's so counterintuitive. Again, government programs in California that sound good often have the exact opposite results. I mean, Ronald Reagan said the most fearful words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
Can you speak briefly about the proposed proposition to repeal the gas tax and amend the Constitution?
Yeah, there are actually two. On Saturday, I actually shared a stage with Travis Allen, who's an assemblyman out of Newport Beach. He's got his measure. He just tentatively won a lawsuit against the Attorney General for preparing a very one-sided title and summary for his ballot measures. He's in litigation over that. His was the first, Travis Allen's was the first repeal of the gas tax proposal filed. There has been a second one filed, and I'm not able at length to talk about too much about what I know about that. I understand that it may have some significant financial backing behind it. So I don't see both measures, repealing the gas tax, being on the ballot. I think people will decide which one's better. And we're looking at it too. Either one is fine with us. We'll support whatever gets on the ballot, but qualifying an initiative takes $2 million minimum. To get it actually voters to pass it, you're talking 8 to 10 million. That's just the harsh realities of California. So we'll see how that shakes out. But we will be supporting any repeal of the gas tax because, again, this is not about hating roads. We love roads, but we think that the money should be directed toward transportation projects.
From San Francisco to LA and back and forth, but cheaper. That rings true. So much is said by the Northern California and the Southern California that ignores the San Joaquin Valley. We don't catch a plane to run to San Francisco, LA that costs those kind of numbers. It costs us maybe $250 a round trip to go to LA or San Francisco on a plane. So to say that high-speed rail doesn't serve a need for the San Francisco and LA, it might serve a need for the Valley, perhaps.
Yeah, I still think that there are, even for residents of the Central Valley, and by the way, I've taken Amtrak, quite frequently do when I go from Sacramento to either Fresno or to Bakersfield. It's a great way to travel. Why they didn't enhance conventional rail instead of this project, and by the way, it will probably be rendered obsolete by Hyperloop by the time it's ready to go. Elon Musk is working on Hyperloop, which is this, this vacuum tube thing. By the time high-speed rail gets done, my guess is that it will be preempted by either Hyperloop or self-driving cars or self-driving buses as a fast way to get from anywhere in California. But high-speed rail is not viable. It's just not. All right. Thank you all very, very much.